Hey guys, this is the third time I'm filming this video. The first time the lighting went off, the second time I was out of focus the entire time, but thankfully I am changing a camera, so don't worry about that. And I've been sitting here for almost 2 hours, and if this goes to show anything, I just wanted to express to you that this video is quite important to me because it is the result of my multiple months of research when I was a high school senior. So if you are an international student watching this, please continue watching. It's not really so much about getting you to agree with me, but more so I just wanted you to consider the factors that I considered and just see, kind of my thought process. And if you are a US student watching this wondering why I didn't pick your school, you can keep on watching for some hot takes. Don't come at me too hard though. Keep in mind that I was a high school senior in Shanghai, had very limited online resources and ability to talk to these students and visit the campus. And so my perception of these schools could be skewed. Let's do the disclaimer again really quickly. And my disclaimer is that I will not be covering any hard researchable things in this video. AKA, if it's something you can find on the website, if it's like a specific online class or a specific program that's better at one school over the other, I'm not going to be covering it in this video. This video is mainly going to be focused on softer metrics, things that I think you can't really find online, and perceptions and just like vague ideas and like admission rates and like application chances and stuff like that, right? That you can't really find online. And I just wanted to make this as, a reference point, so maybe a resource for you if you find this helpful and if you are, from a similar background as I was. So, not an American, I'm Singaporean, grew up not in America. I went to school in Shanghai and did not go to like an American school. So I didn't go to like Shanghai American or anything like that. I went to Shanghai High School International Division. If you would like to know my stats and what I did in high school to get a better sense of, what I'm talking about, I have some older videos on my channel that are but they do get the job done in that they tell you my stats, extracurriculars, essays, all that stuff. So you can check that out if you like. For this video, we're going to be putting UK schools aside. So I'm not going to be discussing any of my UK options, Oxford, all of that. I'm trying to move away from that and just focus on my US college choosing strategy. Also in this video, every single school I mentioned, whether it's a no from me or a yes or a school that I eliminated early on, these are all schools that I ultimately wrote applications to. If I didn't get into UChicago early decision, I would have applied to all of these schools. I'm not saying that you shouldn't apply to these schools. This video is about how you decide on a school to early. So early decision, early application, restrictive early application, all of that stuff. If you are interested in that, this video is for you. Okay, let's get started. So 4 things that I knew I wanted in a university. The first one was I wanted a general 4-year university, so that ruled out specialized colleges, 2-year technical colleges, such as like Georgia Tech or Illinois Tech or stuff like that, just because I didn't want to go to a specialized tech school. The second one is I wanted it to be very near or in a city, and by city I mean like metropolitan area. I grew up in Singapore and Shanghai. I love cities. I think they're excellent ways to get out of, a college campus bubble if you feel like that. And I just really wanted to be near one to feel, the vibrant life and ultimately decide if I want to work in America or not. So the third one is I wanted there to be some sort of structure to the curriculum. I wanted there to be some required courses that every student had to take. I think there are many benefits to this, and be it, general requirements or UChicago's core, I wanted there to be some sort of classes in common. So this ruled out Brown, because you can take any class you would like at Brown. And of course, some people love that, and I think it's great for them. But for me, I wanted something a bit more structured. The next one is I didn't want it to be too big of a school. So that ruled out UCLA, UC Berkeley. I don't usually thrive well, I think, in an environment where I feel very insignificant. I feel like I have no impact on the community. I want to be at a school that, isn't too small, isn't too large. So like a general 4-year university. So here are 3 things that I did not want in a school, and these were a little bit more difficult to arrive to than the previous 4. So the first one was I did not want an undergraduate business program. So this ruled out Berkeley's Haas, the business school, as well as UPenn's undergraduate Wharton program. The reasons for this was because even though, yes, I do want to go into business, I didn't want to go to a business program just because 1, I wasn't sure if this was the career path I wanted to be on, and 2, I didn't want to insert myself into an environment where, everyone was gunning for the same things that I wanted to, because that would give me a lack of perspective. What if I maybe don't want to do business anymore? I wouldn't be able to reach out to resources that could guide me in another path because everyone in this program does business, right? So that was kind of my thinking. And frankly, I felt that a lot of these, generally speaking, these business programs have a more, cutthroat, competitive, ultra gunner culture that I just didn't really want to partake in, even though I think I enjoy stressful environments, but I didn't want to put myself in that situation for 4 years on a career path that I didn't really know if I wanted to be on. So the next one is I didn't want a liberal arts college. This was tough because I really, really liked Amherst. That was one of my favorite US schools. I really liked it. I went to the campus, talked to the admissions officers, and I just really connected with the school. But ultimately, it came down to the tuition price is quite similar. The student body is much smaller. They're usually not in cities. And most importantly, there are just less resources, I think, available at a liberal arts college compared to a general four-year university, in terms of like labs or just, amount of money available for grants. Or it doesn't apply to every college, especially Amherst. In fact, I think 91% of students at Amherst graduate debt-free. So, why am I doing a promo for another school? Okay. Anyhow, I just felt like the resources I could get at a larger university were more worth it to me, and so I ruled that out early on. And then the next one was I wanted somewhere with a decent international student population. This was very important to me because I'm an international student and I want to interact not just with Americans, but from, people from all different types of countries. So I didn't want of course they're all predominantly white, but I didn't want a largely predominantly white population at a college. And so this ruled out Georgetown SFS for me, the School of Foreign Service, even though I really liked the program and I did some research into it and I think I would enjoy it. But I've also heard kind of meh things about their very white, almost like fratty boys club culture, and didn't want to insert myself there for 4 years. So now we have the more spicy part, which I hope you're excited for, because we have Yale, Harvard, Princeton, Columbia, UPenn, Northwestern, JHU, Duke, MIT, Stanford, and obviously UChicago. These were my golden few. I will be going in order of easiest to eliminate in terms of choices to most difficult to eliminate, especially my last two. They were tough. So the first one was Northwestern. Northwestern was a no because I compared it with UChicago and I thought UChicago was better. Duke was a no because it had a very heavy sports-focused, predominantly white, athletic, fratty culture. And I have nothing wrong with an athletic school spirit. I think that's great. I just don't do sports, don't really connect with. I think it was basketball. And I didn't want to put myself in a student body where I wouldn't be able to immediately relate to the majority of the student body. Just didn't really see any reason for that. Plus, I think for economics, I think among the other schools I have on my list, I think Duke's economics program pales in comparison to some of these other ones. The next one was JHU. JHU was a no because it barely fit within the city category for me, being near a city. And I just didn't really feel a strong connection to the school. I talked to some alumni and some students there, and it just didn't inspire me to research further. And when you're applying to college and you need to make a decision quick, time is scarce, and it just didn't have that pull, so I eliminated it early on. The next one was Harvard, which might be surprising because it's actually quite high on this list. Harvard was a no for a very simple reason. One, I didn't have a particular connection to the school other than the fact that it's prestige, and it would be kind of cool to say, I go to Harvard. Other than that, though, 95% of international students, it's around 95%, of international students who are from my region, so China, Shanghai, Greater China, it's a big region, were legacies. 95% of them admitted had one or two parents who had gone to Harvard. And I'm not a Harvard legacy, and that statistic just seemed a little bit steep to me. I do talk about alumni and just people admitted from my region a lot. And so for your reference, there was a girl from my high school 2 years above me who did get into Harvard. She had amazing grades, amazing extracurriculars, and she's kind of like a cool person. But it was also a little bit hard to avoid the fact that she was also the daughter of the founder of Huawei. So I eliminated Harvard. The next one was Stanford, also quite high up on this list. So Stanford was a no. It was more of a realistic decision, honestly. The profiles of people around me who got into Stanford were, wildly different, but they all had one thing in common, and they excelled into an extraordinary amount in whatever it was that they did. So the person who got into Stanford, I think 3 or 4 years above me, he started this drama movement and club that really just rocked our school and our community, and it became one of the most significant clubs for a while, and they put on massive shows and things like that. And I just didn't feel like I had an accomplishment that ranked up to that scale, because it's not even about an award, right? It's about cultural change, that the idea of bringing drama and theater to a not very artistically inclined Shanghai high school. So I eliminated Stanford. Also because I don't really like California weather. I like 4 seasons and I like autumn and winter. So that was a very minor part of my decision though. The next one is Princeton. And Princeton was a no because, not because I had anything against the school, it was more just, it felt like a very liberal art school to me. The campus is gorgeous, but all the kids who were admitted to Princeton, either from Shanghai or near Shanghai or from my high school, all, again, had one thing in common, and was that they had very high GPAs. And I'm not talking about like top 5%, top, 3% of the grade. I'm talking about like they were ranked like first, second, third kind of GPA. And my GPA was good, but like not up there. And it was either they had really good GPA or they had some sort of, nationally or internationally acclaimed academic honor. So be it, some like STEM physics Olympiad award or something in biology or math or something like that. And I was just not very invested in academic awards. I was more of a student government person. And so I veered away from Princeton because of that.
So I know at this point it's starting to sound like I'm eliminating schools just because I don't think I'll get into these, but remember again that this ranking is also based on the hard research I did. So just in terms of classes and campus and all of these things were already kind of counted in. I just didn't really include them in this video because I feel like this is all information you can find online. So yes, of course, a part of my decision to eliminate some of these schools are because I just felt like the students that were admitted there just really didn't have the same profile as I did, and I felt like that's why I wasn't as good of a fit of the school, as well as some other hard factors like their location and their classes offered there, or some programs or scholarships and things like that. So I just wanted you to bear that in mind, that I'm not telling you to eliminate schools just because your profile isn't as good as some people who get in. There's a lot more thought behind of this. That I just kind of condensed the parts I thought were more difficult to research into this video.
The next one was UPenn. I've been to Philadelphia twice, I think, for our Monk, which is their high school model UN that they host. And so from there, I kind of got a snapshot into how the students there at UPenn, because they hosted the conference, interacted with each other. And I talked to a few of them and some of my friends who are at UPenn. It just kind of seemed like a school where they prided themselves a lot on being very put together all of the time. And that's amazing. That's great. And I like to think of myself as a somewhat put together person. And so that really resonated with me. But the part that didn't was the fact that even though a lot of their majors were not business related, most of them were somehow also very business influenced. It was either I'm an arts major, but I want to go into business, or I'm a history major, but I'm also interested in finance. And it just seemed like everyone had this very similar career path. And I just didn't really like that. Again, I wanted diversity exposure in my college experience. So UPenn was a no for me. All right, so now we go down to the 3 most difficult schools to eliminate. And let me tell you, these 3 were very tough. I'm going to talk a little bit more about each school now because these were all very important decisions to me and it took a while. So the first one off the list, so the easiest to eliminate among the 3, was Yale. And Yale is a school that I had been eyeing since, early high school alongside UChicago. I've been to Yale's campus once or twice and really loved it. I think it was amazing. And now they have this new thing glass library or museum or something. And I just thought that was also amazing. The people there seemed, diverse and all very friendly and kind and all that stuff, but also that they had a very, wide array of interests. It's in New Haven, which is kind of a city, but also kind of not a city, right? And I just didn't really know if I wanted to go there. More because, one, I felt like it was almost too liberal arts focused. I do want somewhat of a business exposure. So basically I wanted there to be a business community and a pre-professional community I could reach out to, and lots of resources there to help me if I wanted to. I wanted there to be enough people that I could surround myself with that had, different career interests, but similar academic or just hobbies and interests. And I felt like people at Yale were almost too liberal arts, and that was that. One more thing that I considered about Yale that I think was kind of cool that I found out, I was very proud of myself, but it's honestly not that big of a deal, was that Yale had just built 2 new dorms that year, and they would be looking for students to fill them. Ideally, international students who would be paying, a lot of tuition, full tuition, living in dorms. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Yale did admit more people from China that year than any other year before it. That could just be a growing trend, but for me, it was validation retrospectively. So ultimately, Yale was a no for me. The next one was MIT. And that was difficult because MIT was my dream school since like middle school. Like my password for my laptop in middle school for like 2 years was 3 letters, and you guessed it, it was MIT. Very cringy, I know, but that just goes to show how much I've been thinking about this school ever since I thought of college. I thought about MIT. And so the reasons why I decided to say no was because even though I really loved the campus, architecture was amazing, students seemed just so much fun, I looked at the people who were admitted not just from my region. I actually expanded the scope because I wanted to convince myself to apply there to, you know, not just like China, but like Asia, Southeast Asia, just like larger. And what I saw was that there were a massive influx of STEM focused people. My high school would regularly send 1 kid or 2 kids to MIT each year, and they were all International Math Olympiad gold or silver medalists. Again, not something I should have taken that hard into consideration, but to me at the time, it just seemed nearly impossible. Plus, it's like a 5% admissions rate or something. And if you look into their admissions rates for international students, whether you EA or if you regular, I think it's like a 1% difference. So to me, I was like, okay, if I don't get into UChicago ED, I can, of course I would. Regular decision MIT. So when it came down to EAing UChicago and MIT versus EDing UChicago, I chose to ED. Now the next one is the final one, and that is Columbia. And the reason why Columbia was my final school is because there were just so many similarities in my mind to UChicago until I discovered or I realized 2 really defining characteristics that made me choose UChicago and not Columbia. So I'll get to that in a second. But the parts that were very similar. One is New York and one's in Chicago. I personally like New York much better than Chicago as a city at the time. Still kind of do. I just thought it was a much more vibrant city and it was more fun, honestly. Both had very strong structured curriculums, right? You have the Columbia general requirements and then you have the UChicago core. They're quite similar, but I think the UChicago one is a little bit more humanities focused, but I think they're generally quite similar. Both were around the same size. Both of them had precedents of students with similar profiles as I did. So, you know, economics, political science, MUN, student government, stuff like that, getting into Columbia and UChicago. Not so much UChicago, but kind of. But more Columbia. My school would steadily send 1 or 2 kids per year to Columbia. And for me, that was, you know, enough to rival UChicago in terms of like, can I get in? But ultimately it came down to 2 things, and that was school culture and major. So on the major side, I was pretty set on economics. I knew that I would want to major in economics. And so when I asked a bunch of Columbia friends and alumni about, you know, how's the economic major at Columbia? The response I got was kind of lackluster. Economics was, from what I gathered, seen as kind of like a cop-out major for CS people who couldn't make it in CS, or physics or STEM people who couldn't make it or thought it was too difficult, and then they would switch to economics instead. And it was seen as, you know, as like an easier major to do among all the other majors at Columbia. And I just didn't really like that. You know, I really like economics. Ultimately, it just came down to the fact that I didn't want to go to a school, study a major that I would put a lot of time and effort into, only to have it be seen as kind of a cop-out major. Especially if you consider economics major at UChicago. Obviously, UChicago is very renowned for their economics major. Sometimes I think people hang on a little bit too much, the neoliberalist, like Milton Friedman era of UChicago economics, but it is a very renowned economics program. It's known to be quite difficult. It is quite difficult. And between the 2, UChicago won like the economics major category. Next one was campus culture. Columbia, after visiting, talking to some people, gave me a very strong sense of like a rich person culture, as in it was quite important if you could afford to go out on the town, or if you could afford certain things, or if you were in certain like frats, or if you weren't. And of course, that's true in every single university, and I covered that in my UChicago video, where it is somewhat true for UChicago. But the feeling I got at Columbia was that it was like a rich bubble. And even though, you know, Columbia is located in Harlem, UChicago is located on the south side. I think these are like, just in relation to every other neighborhood in the city, kind of similar neighborhoods, that just kind of stood out to be a bit more. Also really important was that when I asked people in Columbia about like school spirit or school culture, there wasn't really any. It was more of a sense of we go to the best school in New York kind of feeling, rather than like we have a sense of school identity. And that was quite important to me because I wanted to feel like I belonged at a certain university. So ultimately, all of these decisions, and I ended up at UChicago. So if this video was informative for you, let me know down below. If it wasn't, and if you disagree with anything I said, I fully embrace it. I really want to hear your opinions. I know this was a bit of a long video. I don't know how long this is going to be after I edit it, but I'll try to keep it, to all the important bits. But yeah, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't go too hard on me in the comments. I will say that, again, with the disclaimer, this doesn't include any of the hard research. This does not include any of the, actual academic rigorous or like tuition stuff, even though I mentioned it a little bit. It's just more about my softer, just like ambient, just like brain noise that kind of ultimately, swayed my decision, because that exists. And I don't think you should make choices on what school to early decision or early action on just based off of like hard facts. Go with your gut sometimes. And I did, and I don't regret it. So I'll see you guys next week. Hope you enjoyed this week's video.